We often forget that there are people working in the dead of the night while most of us are in bed. Last week, we took a look at the stories from the night shift staffs of 24/7 convenience stores. And picking up the same theme, this week we are looking at the stories from night security guards. I guess night guards are the most obvious source when it comes to horror stories from nighttime workers. Patrolling along through dark and empty malls, hospitals, factories is bound to conjure a primeval sense of fear, even in the bravest of minds. I read already a couple of stories from night guards in my previous episode about the ghost in cinema and public toilets, but today we are full in and going to take a walk along with these night guards through the spooky dark corridors and empty malls. So here are 6 allegedly true stories from Korea about night security guards who had inexplicable experiences on duty. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. This is a true story as it happened to me. I don't suffer any psychological issues and I'm just an all-around ordinary 28-year-old man. It's shortly after I finished the military service. After a few lazy months, I found myself a job at a security company and was soon outsourced to a newly opened shopping mall. The job was comprised with the usual stuff: to keep the crowd in order when there were special events, keep an eye on the security camera for any theft, and to run the patrol 3 times at night. 2 guards were on the night duty together, and one would keep the office while the other go patrolling. Understandably, going around a dark, empty mall was a bit spooky, walking past all those mannequins. 3 months passed and overnight duties started taking a toll on me, and I felt always tired. But a job is a job, and that night too I was going around a patrol at 2 in the morning. As usual, I kept the radio on so that I could chit-chat with my work partner to kill the boredom and, kill the spooky feeling. I walked past the food court and to the supermarket area. I noticed some light coming from the far corner where a refrigerator stood. Had somebody forgot turning off the light? I approached and heard bustling noise, as if somebody was munching on something. And indeed, I saw the back of a man in front of the refrigerated showcase unit and clearly eating away something from it. "Who's there?" I instinctively called out. The mop-headed man seemed stopping short for a second, but soon carried on munching away. He also mumbled something in between his munches, but I could not understand a word. Was it perhaps a foreigner? I radioed my partner that there was somebody here and he'd better come over. But I got no reply. Was the radio out of order? But before I could try again, I felt my sight closing in and blurring, as if I fell into water and gradually drowning deeper down. And in that blurry tunnel vision, I saw the strange man standing up. He walked up to me cackling, but I felt so heavy and fainted that I could not do anything.
"Still standing? For how much longer?"
I heard him saying. Then I sensed him beating me mercilessly, but I still could not do anything, as if it was happening to somebody else. I don't know how long that lasted, but suddenly felt my tunnel vision opening up again. I was confused. I was on the floor, my uniform was all wet, my head was ringing, a front tooth was broken, both my nose and lips were wet. I dabbed them and found out they were blood. In my younger years, I did get involved in fights a few times, but I had never been so thoroughly beaten up. But more than the physical pain, I was desperate to get to somewhere bright. I dragged myself slowly back to the security office. It was empty. I sat there a while trying to grasp what had just happened. Only then I thought to radio my partner not to chase the man, that he was dangerous. Thankfully, he replied right away this time. Police and ambulance were called, but I could not stay up, consumed by a heavy exhaustion. I only woke up in the hospital. I could feel my face all swollen up. My family and police came, and I could just recount what I experienced. The police filled up what my work partner explained. Shortly after I went out for patrol, the radio went funny, keeping making the static noise. He fiddled with it and changed the battery too, but it didn't fix. In the end, he just turned it off. Then he saw a man in suit going out. My partner just assumed him to be one of the managers, and as the protocol asked him to put his bag through the X-ray scanner. But the guy in suit smirked and said, "Your partner is getting beaten up by the monster guy. He'd kill him." My partner didn't understand what he meant, but anyway ran up to the stores just in case. In the faint light, he heard stomping noises. When he ran over, he saw a man running away and me on the ground in the pool of my own blood. He chased the man after, but he ran as fast as a wild animal, and partner soon lost the sight of him. He then saw a sort of a vision of himself getting hit by a car, and it made him stop the chase. And that's my story. Unfortunately, there's no clear ending, as the police investigation came up with no conclusive result either. That's already 3 years ago, and I would still occasionally meet my then work partner and discuss about that mysterious night, touching from potential possession to black magic. But who can tell? I work as a security staff at a university hospital. The hospital is a 10-story building. At nights we patrol all around the building except for the top floor where the director's office is situated. And there's a rumor amongst security staff that if one happens to patrol the 8th floor at 2 in the morning, he would hear footsteps of high-heeled shoes. The corridor of the 8th floor is covered with a soft, sound-absorbing floor tile that normal footsteps wouldn't make any noise. Despite all the rampant rumors, I didn't believe it because I didn't hear the footsteps myself until last night. I happened to be patrolling the infamous 8th floor alone exactly at 2 in the morning. A footstep. At first I wasn't sure, but all the stories I've been hearing came back to me all at once. It was definitely a sound from a light female footstep wearing high-heeled shoes, not heavier, duller one from male shoes. I carried on with my normal pace, pretending I hadn't heard anything. The footstep carried on exactly a half step behind my own walking pace. It was like a tease saying, "Here I am, don't ignore me." Even in that scary moment, I wondered. On the soft flooring, one could not make such a clear footstep. How could that be then? Where was the footstep from? Then I realized something, and all my hair stood on ends. The only spot where one could make such loud and clear footstep while not losing the sight of my move was the ceiling. The ceiling along the corridor on the 8th floor was a full skylight made of hard plexiglass. I didn't dare to look up, but the image of a female ghost in high heels walking on the ceiling right above my head chilled my blood cold. I barely managed to reach the end of the corridor, looking straight all the time. I have no way to prove my theory is correct or not, but I have no desire to find out. It was before I started military service, so it must have been in summer 1998. I got a part-time work at a hotel as its security staff. My main duty was the night patrol from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. I would take the elevator all the way up to the top 19th floor and walk down through the corridor on each floor, using the stairs on each end of the floor, and check if any disturbances like a drunken client or a suspicious intruder. As usual, there were some internal rumors that the cafe on the 15th floor at night was particularly spooky, or the light bulb in the staircase hall on the 11th floor would always go out. And indeed, that muggy, rainy night, I found the bulb was out on the 11th floor again. I noted light bulb exchange required in the patrol checklist and opened the door to the corridor. At the end of corridors were 2 armchairs, and there was sitting a woman in black dress. For a second, I just froze there, running into an unexpected presence. Chills ran along my spine. What the heck was she doing there at 3 o'clock at night? Good evening, I mumbled. But she barely lifted her gaze up to my chest and didn't say anything. Her somber atmosphere somehow made the situation creepier, and I hurried my way down the corridor. The hotel building was in a crescent shape, meaning once I passed the midpoint of the curve, I would be out of the strange woman's sight. Once I passed the midpoint, I turned around and carefully peeped back. Shit, she wasn't there anymore. The hotel building was very well insulated, and at quiet nights it was dead silent inside. It would have been impossible not to have heard anything had she moved anywhere or opened any doors. I didn't hear anything, and yet she wasn't there. I ran to the elevator, radioing the office. "Ghost! There's a ghost here!" My radio created a bit of a stir. The manager on duty and the head of the security all came up to the 11th floor with me, and even viewed a record from the surveillance camera. But there was no proof that could back up my account. I blushed because I would be seen as a guy who chickened out for nothing. But later, the manager on duty called me to the side and quietly asked,
"Was she wearing a black dress?"
I must have looked back at him with wide eyes. After a short moment of silence, the manager told me, about 3 years ago, a female client committed suicide in the hotel. Her fiancé broke up with her, and that led to the extreme choice. The window in the rooms could be opened only ajar for security reason, so instead she chose to throw herself from the central floating stairwell, whose middle space opened all the way down to the ground floor. I did wonder why the grand central staircase was not in use anymore, and apparently that was why. The manager added,
"I did see her too before. While on the night shift, I walked past the cafe on the 15th floor. I stopped sensing some odd chill, and found a woman in black dress in the empty cafe. She had no legs.
I couldn't continue the patrol duty once having learnt the full story. I quit it after about a week later. I work for a security company. My job was comprised mainly with a regular patrol at client site and emergency dispatch when there was a situation. Back in August, it was day of downpour. I arrived one building for a regular patrol at about lunchtime. Day being wet and muggy, I wasn't in a hurry and went down to the basement to start my routine. The building itself was accessible only with a permission, and the basement had no real facility other than parking space, boiler room, and storage, meaning it was very quiet there even in the day. The management of that particular building usually played background music in the basement, normally various light pop songs, but that day it was Beethoven's For Elise, played on violin. I don't know much about classical music, but knew For Elise, so went around the basement humming the tune. But whoever played it wasn't very good, occasionally making typical scratch noise. The high-pitched noise gave me a bit of goosebumps. And then I ran into a little boy. He smiled brightly and asked the way to 5th floor. I just assumed he should be the son of a client, so I took him to the 5th floor, opened the door with my card key for him, and went back to my patrol. At the end of it, I went to the management office to sign off and casually mentioned For Elise on scratch violin was a bit creepy in the basement. The staff there looked at me with an expression that he didn't understand what I was talking about. There was no For Elise in the playlist. Then his boss cut in, saying they didn't play music at all that day due to the sound system maintenance. I felt as if somebody hit the back of my head. I did hear it. Sound from outside could not be heard in the basement either. I was baffled, but tried to brush it off. And then when I mentioned that I found a boy in the basement and took him to 5th floor, the staffs looked at me once again as if something was wrong with me. Apparently the 5th floor was going under refurbishment, knocking off a few walls for a larger open space. The entire floor was empty and there was no business for a little boy to go there. I and a staff hurried up to the 5th floor and checked every corner, but there was no sign of the boy, but construction debris and dust scattered in the empty space. We even checked the records from the surveillance camera in the elevator. Nothing. After the day's work, my colleagues told me to forget it all over chilled beers and fried chicken. But together with the stormy weather, it will remain an unforgettable day for me. I first want to emphasize that this is 100% true story as I experienced. 4 years ago, I got a job as a security staff, and after several different positions, was outsourced to a general hospital in Incheon. My job included to patrol every 2 hours, to manage car parkings, to deal with a commotion or disturbances, usually in the emergency room. For patrolling, I had to check in with my card at each scanner up and down the building, about 20 of them. So whether I liked it or not, the regular patrol had to be run like a clockwork. For this particular hospital, I was instructed to lock up every door between 6 and 9 p.m, save from the emergency and patient wards. Into the second month there, one night I felt really heavy and tired, as if I were carrying somebody on my shoulders. But what could I do? A job is a job. At about 1 in the morning, I got a radio from the emergency room. As you can imagine, at the emergency room go all sorts of human drama, and many people lose their control facing the matter of life, blood, pain, and death. As much as I tried to understand, it still was the worst part of my job to deal with such people. So I went down to the emergency expecting another such a case, but no. A couple of nurses and an intern doctor asked me to help them to move something. Something wrapped up under a thick half-transparent plastic sheet. Only when I actually got hold of it myself, I realized it was a body. Apparently, it was the body of an old lady who was killed by a car accident just 30 minutes earlier. My hairs stood on ends, but didn't want to show it to the nurses and the doctor, for whom it must be just a part of their daily job. The little body of the dead lady was much heavier than expected, and in the end we needed 2 more people before we could finally move her onto the stretcher. I went back to my usual job and started my patrol routine at 2 a.m., but I could not easily shake off the eerie feeling which made me walking around the quiet corridors in the dark feel creepier than usual. Nevertheless, I managed to go around my usual route, and now it was time to check in at the 17th scanner. Past the psychiatric ward and around the corner, I unlocked the door and took a few steps forward, when I froze stuck there. It felt like my heart dropping down to the floor. About 20 meters away from me, an old lady in black with her hair down all messy walked away to the emergency exit in an impossible speed. There couldn't be anybody on the floor. Hadn't I already locked every door earlier in the evening and double and triple checked them? I think I was stuck there for a good few minutes, soaked in cold sweat. When I could dare to move again, I quietly tiptoed around the corner and carefully peeped towards the exit. There was nobody. I approached the exit door, desperately hoping that it was opened, because that would leave a chance the old lady I saw was a person after all. No, it was locked all right. Until then, I never believed in paranormals. Don't believe until I see it with my own eyes, was my motto. So strong was my skepticism that the shock and horror I felt when I finally witnessed an inexplicable. In the end, I quitted the job. I don't believe when people say they screamed when they ran into a ghost. From my own experience, when you face something truly out of this world, you are just frozen stuck there and unable to produce even a faint moan. Anyway, that was my story. In 2004, I just finished the military service and found a job in a small security company. I was usually sent off to various events to keep the crowd in order. Fresh out from the military, I worked hard, and probably for that reason, I was soon promoted to the position of a team leader. At the time, I lived in the southern city of Ulsan. Its Grand Park had just opened, and as its first major event, they organized a circus show. In the airdome tent were some animals like a baby bear, American raccoon, and so on the show, and the acrobat team from China performed. And I was in the charge of the security there. 2 part-timers took charge during the day, and I took over for nights from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning. The work was easy. The construction of various infrastructures in the park was still going on, and the park was closed to the public at night. So all I had to do was to check if the animals were doing fine and make sure the event facilities were in place. Into the second week on the duty, I finished checking around inside the air dome and was on my way to check the stable for horses that were part of the acrobatic show. I heard from afar some metallic creaking noise, like from a swing. I figured out it was from the hilly side of the park, and to my knowledge there was no playground in that part of the park. I wondered, but didn't want to climb up the hill in the dead of the night, so I just checked on the horses and went back to my office. Following day I asked the park management, and indeed was confirmed that there was no facility in the hillside. I felt a bit spooked, but rationalized it might have been from a factory in the area, as Ulsan is an industrial town after all. But the same noise returned every night. Maybe it was my imagination, but it even seemed to be getting closer by day. My petrol to the horse stable got shorter and shorter because I felt gradually uncomfortable. Then one night, the same noise was heard again on my way to the stable, except it was much closer this time. I still wanted to believe there must be a rational source of the sound. Some teenagers must have sneaked in and were playing a prank, I thought. It must be. It had to be. I took the pepper spray gun out and shouted to the direction of the noise. "Stop fooling around and come out!" Regardless, the creaking noise continued and got louder. Soon I became sure it was coming from within the range of my sight, and then the sound started coming from other directions too, from left and right, east and west, all around me. I was frozen there with a panic, still holding out the gas gun in an awkward position. I decided to run back to my office. I would run at 3, 1, 2. The noise disappeared all at once. You know what? The sudden silence was even more terrifying. I could not move or think. I was just shivering, glaring at the bush from where the creaking noise was last heard. The noise rang right in my ears. My legs gave in and I collapsed on the ground. Only a few seconds later I could shake myself up and ran to the office. I hid myself there till the dawn broke. I searched around in the morning, but I could not find any sign of an intruder. I reported what happened to my boss, but he didn't take it seriously at all and turned down my plea for a partner on the night shift. I could not quit right away for having the title of a team leader, but stayed in the office for the rest of my time on duty in the park. And that was the last job by the security company, needless to say. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. The stories on my channel are, of course, usually meant to be spooky, but while preparing last and this week's episode, I actually got to appreciate more about the people who work through the nights. Not that I didn't know their existence, but these stories do make it more tangible what kinds of difficulty one has to deal with on night shifts. I hope you feel the same. Next week is already my 100th episode, and it will be a compilation of favorite stories from the past 49 episodes. I hope you join that little celebration. If you enjoyed my video, give it a comment and a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. My little channel has still a long way to go till it could take off, and I hope you join to make it a bit closer. Thank you. Until the next Sunday, stay safe and take care.